Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Soul Creativity. I'm really excited for this evening here in my neck of the woods. It's evening, part around wherever you are in the world. I'm so glad that you're joining us, and I want to just remind everyone to please like, please subscribe, and share the video to help the channel. The live chat is up, so if you have a comment for our guest or a question, please feel free to use the comment section, and I will get to that while I'm talking with my guest tonight, who is Brigid Hopkins. And I'm so excited to have Brigid because we're going to be talking about some of my favorite subjects. One in particular is wind. Brigid is a coach. She developed the Clarity Path. She's also very nature based in her work, which I love. And she's also the program director for Renee Baribeau, the practical shaman. And that's where she got into wind work. And we're going to open with that, if you don't mind, Brigid, and then we'll move into some of the work that you do as well. So, welcome to the show, first of all.
Thank you, Nathan. I'm happy to be here. It's not often that people are like, hey, tell me more about the wind. Just this morning, I stopped to get a coffee at our local coffee house, and the wind gusted right between the window and my car. And she's like, ooh, the wind. And I said, well, let me tell you about my day job. And so we had a beautiful conversation about the wind. So it seems that the wind is starting to get people's attention again, which is really exciting for us as wind workers, because we've been quietly listening, if you will, to the winds I've been with Renee for 4 years. She's been developing the winds of spirit and the wind work longer than that. So yeah, I'm really happy to be here. And for your guests and for you and I, we're noticing that the collective feels pretty dense right now. There's a lot going on. And I even today had to turn off notifications on my phone. I just kept getting news alerts nonstop. And I'm like, no, that's not going to suffice for where I need to be right now. So what I would love to do is share a wind breath with you and those that are listening now and later. This is a fundamental process that we do in the wind work teaching. And what it does is it really helps to ground us, center us, bring us into ourselves completely, and be able to attune and listen much more clearly. So just make sure that both of your feet are nice and firmly on the floor and that your spine is erect. The straighter our back, not that we're overextending, right? But just a nice posture, because the straighter we are, the more aligned we are to bring in that beautiful flow of energy. And the first breath in, what we're doing is we're bringing our attention into our center and we're connecting with the earth. So just imagine as you're breathing in that you're bringing all of yourself into this moment, and that you're beginning to open your crown and bring in that beautiful light source energy to come all the way through you, right? And so that breath will be 7 in, hold for 7, breathe out for 7, and stay empty for 7. If you do not stay empty for 7, that's fine. Do it to where you feel, okay, now I'm ready to take another breath. The second breath in, we're going to be connecting with the wind Eurus. Right now we're working in the east, which is all about the mind, the memories, and beliefs. So we're going to welcome Eurus into our conversation today, which should be really fun. And then on our third breath, we're going to connect you and I and all of those that will be joining us, either now or in a later time. And so let's begin. Go ahead and close your eyes if you like and you feel comfortable. For those listening, please keep your eyes on the road. We don't want any mishaps. All right. So the first breath in, we're breathing in for 7. And you're going to hold, really opening up that channel and inviting the wind to come through. Breathe out. Stay empty. Next breath in, we're breathing in Eurus, the wind of the east, welcoming Eurus to be with us. Hold. And release. Stay empty. And now we're breathing in, bringing in all of our energies concentrated in this circle with the beautiful guest Eurus. Hold. And exhale. Stay empty. And go back to your normal cadence of breath. Thank you. How did that feel, Nathan?
That was really good, Brigid, and very beautiful. And as we were talking, yes, that was very helpful today.
Yeah.
I
Great.
think you're right. We're picking up a lot of odd energy right now that is kind of not leaving us very calm. So I might mention there, and I'm not sure if you did, but you were using a wind whistle to do the whistling.
Yeah, this is a beautiful golden jaguar whistle. There's a few different sizes and types available at thepracticalshaman.com.
Okay, yeah, that's important. I was also watching the wind today. Especially since we were talking recently, going outside to interact with nature. Something that we're going to talk about this evening, or during the program today, is the intelligence of the wind and nature in general. And I just have been going outside every day to kind of take note. What do I notice here that reminds me that nature is alive, that there's an intelligent force there, that we're in communication and partnership with it? And today I was looking at the trees on the hillside behind my house. And at first, it was just the tops very slowly moving. And then it was like the whole trees, the whole group of trees started swaying. So, I felt really connected to the wind. And I mean, I always have since I was a child. It's been a very important element of nature, or one of the nature beings that has been so important to me. So you were just showing us there the wind whistle and talking about the wind from the east. I know that Renee has a deck of cards. She did a lot of studying. I have her book, and I know you do. You have it there with you. So can you tell us a little bit about the wind work and the wind? Yes. Winds of Spirit.
Yeah. Where to begin? When the winds delivered me, I should say, to Renee, it wasn't where I thought I was heading, and that's the nature of the wind. It knows where we're needed, when we're needed, and how we're needed. And it took me a long time to catch up to that knowledge. Right. So the winds brought me to Renee, and I was kicking and screaming. Like, this is why I don't even know why I'm here. This is so annoying to me. Like, what am I doing in this wind work? What is wind work? None of it makes sense. Right. I had an insurmountable amount of resistance, which the winds love, because, there's nothing more fun than working with a skeptic. Right. I think as a metaphysicist yourself, you understand that process. Right. It's a lot of fun. So through many, many, many courses of the wind work, I came to learn that the wind is not about the mental process. It's really an unlearning of many of the things that we've been taught to come back into cycles and rhythms and intuitive information as opposed to being told. There's a lot of showing and experiencing and symbols, and it's an incredibly powerful healing system, and it helped me heal through trauma and narratives that weren't shifting through other processes. I had done a lot of work before I came to the winds, but in hindsight, it was preparation. I don't think I would have been ready for what the winds had in store had I not done some of those other deep dives.
That's really interesting, Brigid. Can you talk a little bit about, I had mentioned, in the opening about wind as an intelligent and interconnected force and also a source of communication?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So I was on a trip in the Caribbean, and the entire time the wind was blowing horizontally across the sand. I mean, I kept asking the locals, is this normal? Is it always this strong? The wind, is it always this strong here? And they're like, no, this is not normal. But it felt like I was being punished every time I tried to go down to the ocean. And it was so annoying to me. And on the last day of our trip, I just screamed into the wind, what do you want from me? You're so annoying. And right then I heard, you don't know how to walk with me. The teacher will come. And about 3 weeks later, I received an email from a Renee Baribeau. No idea how she had my email address, didn't know what the wind work was about. And here we are, 4 years later, I'm the program manager. Did it speak in a human voice? No. Did I intuitively know what was being said to me? Yes. Because I didn't have that message running through my head at that time. I wasn't even thinking about the wind. I wanted to get away from the wind. I didn't want to be closer to it, But through this work, I've heard people's names on the wind. When you hear people talk about, oh, I had this sudden epiphany or this huge insight or a new process or, woo, like they'll just get this like light bulb moment. Well, I wonder if that came from the wind. We live in a closed system, and the wind travels around the globe. I think it's in around 3.5 days. So we're breathing the same air as the trees and the lions and, those on the African continent. And it doesn't matter where you are. We're sharing the same wind. And so if an idea goes out on the wind and someone doesn't grab it, it'll keep going around until someone does, which I think is fascinating.
That really is fascinating, just to think, like in 3.5 days, the wind has actually, gone around the world. And that brings me back to thinking about wind as a source of communication.
Mm-hmm.
And I always think of it as a storyteller because of what's carried on the wind. It can be something as simple as, what's going on your street, in your neighborhood, might carry the scent of somebody having a barbecue outside.
Songbirds, the leaves, yeah.
Mm-hmm. What's going by you, what's, being pushed on the wind. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if you think of that communication aspect in some other way that I wasn't thinking of there. And also that ties me back to the intelligence and us being in relationship or partnership with the wind and really all of nature. But if you want to speak a little bit about that, about the wind.
Well, I think that it's important to notice that many of us have different sensory strengths. Right? One of my primary clairs is clairsentience. So I can feel things before I hear them, smell them, or see them. But there's something really interesting about being a wind worker is it opens up these new senses that you don't even have a name for. Right? And it's like they're hair trigger senses. So I can notice an animal in the environment before I ever hear it or see it. Maybe that came in on the breeze, right? Maybe I smelled it, but I wasn't aware that I was smelling it, or I heard it, but I wasn't aware that I heard it. And it's almost as though the wind has helped open more of my awarenesses and more of my sensibilities, if you will. When we moved into our home here, I wouldn't have known that this was a wind experience. I wasn't thinking of that at that time. But we live right up from the steel mills. I live in Cleveland. And I remember thinking, like, something feels dangerous about living here, right? I was smelling it. I was smelling the pollution, but the way that I processed it was danger.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That was how I identified or made sense of what I was already perceiving. And there's a lot of that happens in the wind work, but what we tend to do is brush it off. I'm not really noticing that, or that's not what I thought it was. So it's a great experience to be with other people that are having these extra sensory moments that are delivered from the wind, and get to talk about it and share and learn. What did this mean for me? Why was I being shown this? It takes time.
When you talk about wind as a healing modality, and if we think of it as sort of a new paradigm of reality, what do you mean by healing modality, or how working with the wind? I think you explained a little bit in your own experience. But if someone is thinking about doing wind work, what might they use it for? What type of healing? And how does it create a new paradigm for reality?
That's such a good question, Nathan. So I'll give you a short, long answer. That's too vast to just surmise in a few words. So here we go. As I had mentioned earlier, I had a lot of resistance when I came into the wind work, even though I had done a lot of other studies and experiences through shadow and through metaphysics and spiritual processes. I was, highly, highly devoted to a meditation practice. And but when I came into the wind work, it was like, oh, you want me to do what? You want me to work with my resistance? What does that even mean? And so right there, you're already beginning to look to nature, right? In order to understand the wind's relationship, how is it affecting an environment? I have to put myself as the environment. I can't be separate from it. Just that is hugely healing. To recognize I am not different. I am not separate from this river or these trees or this soil. I am this. And beginning to feel how the wind comes across the tree line and why, right? Why is it coming through with such force in this direction and not in the other? And then you begin to notice, well, wait a minute, where do I need to lean into that resistance, and how might that help me? Instead of walking away from it or stuffing it down, right? I used to have a pretty good cookie habit. I love chocolate chip cookies. I'll never lie about that. But why would I reach for a cookie and not sit in the wind? Right? So spending that time doing the deep, deep exploration, the wind helped me to deepen my roots, to find that inner strength and the resilience and the resources. Because you cannot stand out in the full force of the wind without deep roots. It'll just blow you over. Mm-hmm. Well, if we made that less wind specific and more light specific, how do you respond or react when your boss is screaming at you or asking you to work 30 hours longer than you had anticipated for that week? Right? That's a force of wind. These, external experiences that come up against us, and we don't really know how we're going to respond because we haven't developed that inner sense of resilience and that self-connection of, yeah, that doesn't work for me, right? I'm not going to do the same people-pleasing, good girl behaviors that I learned how to do through school and in my environment and my, my community at the time. The wind is like, let's get rid of all of that. Let's strip your bark put you in the, out here naked, and let's rebuild again. So through a lot of the processes that have been developed um, in the wind work, like you're learning how to really let those roots unfurl and deepen and expand so that you're always connected.
That's really interesting and helpful, and also clarifies how we can use wind. There's one other point I want to make about the wind, and you were talking about kind of relearning, or moving past what we were taught. And it makes me think of how we were taught, and this is kind of an ancient, or at least somewhat older, philosophy of dominating nature. And I know that with wind work, that you discovered that there were some ancient wind caves.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering, that's so interesting to me. And if you could just talk very briefly about that, so other folks know what they are.
Yeah, so a couple things in respects to the ideas that we know what's best for nature, that dominant mindset. They were trying to replicate life on Earth in a biodome in Arizona back in, I think it was the 90s. I'm not exactly sure. And when I had first heard this story by one of my mentors, I was just dumbfounded when I heard it. And I never realized that it was like a precursor to where I was headed. So she was explaining that in this biodome, they had all of these beautiful plant species and trees and, vegetation, like they had herbs and, food sources, and everything was doing really well. And they were about 5 years into the project, and the trees started to fall over dead. And they could not understand what was happening. And, as they started to look at the data and recognize, oh, wait a minute, we don't have a force of wind in here. We have oxygen, but we don't have any breezes. And so the trees couldn't grow roots, like nice deep roots that could really hold up those trunks and help them to keep growing. So there's a great purpose to the forces that are at play in our lives. And they're not trying to dominate us. They're trying to help us. They want to be in relationship with us, right? So when Renee had discovered, when the winds began whispering to her, and she discovered, oh, wait a minute, I'm not actually writing a book of metaphors. This is actually a healing system. She was in Mexico, and in Mexico City, they had uncovered an ancient wind tomb or cave for Ecatel, the Aztec wind god. And it was underneath a supermarket. So they were demolishing the supermarket and then found this beautiful hidden wind cave or wind tomb, all devoted to Ecatel. And it turns out that there are wind caves all around the world, but no one was attending to them and visiting and being in that space, right? That deep space of listening with them. When you think of a cave, it's almost like an isolated experience. It's you, rock, and wind, right? And you're not hearing all of the outer noise. So yeah, they're all over the world. They have them in Germany. They have it in Mexico City, Utah, South Dakota. I mean, there's plenty more. There's some in California. So yeah, I think there's actually like a wind cave trail that you can hike. Mm-hmm.
Wow, that is really fascinating.
Yeah.
To me, and I hope at some point to actually be able to visit one.
Yeah.
Which kind of leads me into your own work with the clarity path. And also, I know with that you have like 3 artistic kind of branches to your work.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if you can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. When I met Renee, I was already doing coaching, but I was working with a business partner at the time, and she and I went different ways. We had different directions we were headed in. So the clarity path was derived from that change in direction. And what I really came to learn is that a lot of my clients, they weren't seeking to make smart goals. They were seeking to hear the sound and the resonance of their own soul's voice. They were trying to find the direction of where they felt lost or isolated on their journey. And it was because they weren't listening from a soul perspective. They were listening from that, again, that dominant perspective of shoulds and have tos and, success driven. I practical, I guess would be the word that I would use, right? Like that practical path. And so the clarity path was derived to help people really sit in a space where we are listening from a much deeper place than what you think life has to look like for you, and begin listening to what life is actually offering you. And I've lived that through these many, many changes that I've undergone in my own journey. I wrote about it in my book, The Feathers of a Phoenix. I wrote a memoir about it. But I'm also an artist. I'm an artist of the spirit. And the more you listen to your soul, the more gifts you unlock, right? So I have Souletry, which is a spoken word poetry that I send out, a couple times a year. I do a lot of macro photography. And the reason for that is when I'm really looking at the microcosm of the world, there are these hidden conversations that are happening all day long underneath our feet, and no one's paying attention. There's an entire world within a world within a world going on down there, or up there. Sometimes it's in a dewdrop, and I'm using the macros. So I'm trying to bring people's attention to the simplistic beauty that surrounds us in any given moment. It is always here. But it's our responsibility to look, right? To be with it, to slow down long enough to notice a dewdrop before it evaporates, And then I also do impermasculptures, and impermasculptures is a gift of the wind. It was through one of our early wind processes where we planted a seed of intention. And when I did that, I was greeted by a water deity. And at that time, I thought, well, this is odd that I'm seeing this happening right now. What is this that I'm actually seeing? I had never seen a water deity before. And in that area, I was invited to begin visiting on a regular basis. And through those visits, I started leaving earth offerings that were these natural formations, if you will. Some would call them mandalas. They're not always in that shape. So, mandala isn't an accurate description, but I find items throughout the landscape that are already there because, again, I have a high proclivity to really, really unwind myself from that patriarchal mindset of it's going to be this way because I say so. And I, through being with the environment, have learned of the needs of that particular bioregion. I don't take in seeds or anything that would propagate because the land right there is trying to heal and it cannot sustain more life. It chooses. I don't decide that, right? So sometimes you'll see earth artists doing these beautiful creations, but are they really healthy for that environment? If we're leaving a bunch of things there that don't belong there and then they take root, well, was that helpful? I don't know. Maybe that environment asked for it, but impermasculptures is a devoted practice of deep, deep listening and moving and flowing and stepping in the rhythm that land is inviting.
When you talk about that, it makes me think of, again, communicating, the importance of communicating, respect, and developing a relationship with a particular area. If you're going to be interacting with it, it's really like an act of reciprocity between, the individual or a group and the land. And so I think that's really important. And it is a switch in a mindset from the way that most of us have grown up. not
You
to
know,
think
it's
about
funny, Renee, so she's taught me so much through the wind work, right? Um, and she also has been experiencing in permasculptures as I develop it. Well, when she had moved on to her new parcel up in Whidbey, she was trying to plant this particular type of grass. And so she was uprooting it and transplanting it to another area. And when she tried to do it, the plant knocked her on her butt. And she wrote me and she was like, wow, you're right. Like this, there's really something to this. And they said, they'll let you know. I mean, we think we know where they're supposed to be, but they are always trying to tell us something that they need.
Mhm.
Um, that's just like one example of when you really tune in with that reverential mindset of, I am here to be with you and not, to tell you, but to be with you. It's a very different way of operating and it's much slower. I'm not hiking quickly through any area. I'm stepping lightly and intentionally. It's like a walking prayer, a walking meditation.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful way to say it. And again, it's so different than that dominance. But as we're talking about having this relationship and thinking and being in that way, it makes me also think about the physical, not just our emotional and spiritual um, aspects that come with that. But, when we destroy the land, how that affects our own health.
Mm-hmm.
We're not only hurting the land, but hurting ourselves because, as you pointed out at the beginning, we're not separate from that. We're really, it is us and we are it. And
Right.
if we view it that way,
I mean, I learned that through the land. I was walking a job site and this particular area had many failed business attempts on it. And it's in a part of the city that has a lot of needs when it comes to social services. So, being a holistic health practitioner, I know a lot of people in the area, and we had a great vision. We had a great vision for what we could offer, right? But I was invited onto that land to really hear what the land had in store for it. And that land is in a regenerative process and did not want to support any more development or a lot of foot traffic. It needed stillness. It needed to be left alone. And that's why these other businesses really never took root or succeeded because the land didn't want them there. Well, a lot of the people in that area are also not feeling well. So when you think about the quality and the health of the land itself, and you think of the earth as a body, if the water is polluted, what is the quality of our blood, right? When we're digging the earth and just ripping and tearing and redepositing, I mean, imagine if somebody came and started doing that to your own body. How long would it take you to heal?
right?
You know, and I know that that's a little graphic, but there are atrocities happening all the time outside of our windows. And are we paying attention? And why do we feel like it isn't us? That's, it boggles the mind. Um, like I've had a long standing practice of helping animals that have been hit, or, something. I don't always know what happened, but through that process, my children would go, Mom, don't pull over and pick up that whatever off the road. I have gloves and like a little cardboard thing in the back of my car. I'm like set up for it. And I said to them, if that were a human, would you leave it? Of course you wouldn't. But why? Because it's a blue jay or a possum or whatever else it is, does that mean less?
Mhm.
They're a huge part of our environment. They help the land all around this home, all like they're a huge part of us, right? So there's this very strongly woven idea of hierarchy. And again, it's that that call and that invitation to really being with all of who we really are and how we affect everything around us.
Yeah, that's a really nice way to say that. And it's a really good thought and image to end on, I think, where just a little past our time. Of course, we could go on talking for a long time about all of this because it's so important and so interesting. I want to thank you for being here, Brigid, and doing the wind whistle and having this conversation. I want to mention to everyone that below the video, your a link to your website and to the Practical Shaman as well is under there if you want to contact Brigid. And also, I want to mention that next week on the 17th, Carrie Lake will be here. And she was one of the women featured in my documentary. And Carrie is also very connected to the land and to nature. So that's going to be another good conversation. So if anyone wants to leave a comment later, if you're listening to this later, I will make sure that Brigid gets the comment. And I want to thank you so much for being here again, Brigid, and hope you'll come back.
Yes, thank you. I would love to, Nathan. I'm actually in the process right now of releasing a 4-part, I don't know, trilogy, I guess, for lack of a better word right now, of poetry books called Love Letters to the Earth. So I would love to share some of that with you at a later time. Yeah.
Yes, and as a writer, and I know I'm a lot of poetry friends, so we'll be very interested in hearing about that if you can come back and talk to us.
Absolutely. So, thank you. This has been lovely.
Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for joining. We will see you next week. Have a good week. Bye.